many more killings is enough for you? Is it 1,000 more? 2,000 more? 3,000 more? How many more Palestinians would make you happy if they died? Will you be fine if all of the people of Gaza were gone? Would that make you happy? Would that be the thing that makes you proud? And maybe that's the question you should ask Richie. Is he okay? How many more Palestinian lives is he comfortable with?
You just watched Ilhan Omar condemn her colleague Richie Torres for defending Israel's war crimes. And if you look at this guy's Twitter timeline, it's evident that he doesn't think Israel can ever do wrong in any circumstance ever. And that's not really surprising for him, considering the fact that he is paid by the Israel lobby to represent their right-wing government's position on everything. In fact, AIPAC is his #1 campaign contributor. But he's not even pretending to care at all about innocent civilians who are now being punished for the crimes of Hamas. He even went as far as to condemn Jewish organizations calling for peace, then subsequently blocked activists who criticized him for it. And if that wasn't despicable enough, he accused critics of his genocidal rhetoric of inciting violence against him. But while he plays the victim, his Muslim colleagues like Ilhan Omar are seeing a spike in death threats, with threatening voicemails calling her a terrorist Muslim. And the reason why this is happening, the reason why his Muslim colleagues are getting these calls, getting these voicemails where they're being called terrorists, is because people like him suggest that anyone who doesn't unequivocally support Israel must be sympathetic to the Hamas terrorists. But according to him, he's the real victim, not Ilhan Omar, who's getting death threats currently. But he responded to Ilhan Omar's criticism, and he decided to smear her even more.
And maybe that's the question you should ask Richie. Is he okay? How many more Palestinian lives is he comfortable with?
What's your response?
I mean, I obviously resent those comments. You know, every casualty is a tragedy. Every war is a humanitarian crisis. But we have to keep in mind the causes of the war. Israel did not start the war. The war was imposed upon Israel by the barbaric terrorism of Hamas, which butchered 1,400 Israelis, including babies. You know, my colleague, Representative Omar, has voted against Iron Dome, which is a missile defense system that protects Israeli civilians from relentless rocket fire. Were it not for Iron Dome interceptions, there would be far more dead Israelis, far more, by orders of magnitude. And so the policy positions that she has taken would have led to even more dead Israelis and more dead Palestinians.
That is a despicable lie to spread about his colleague that is currently facing death threats. Ilhan Omar did not vote against the Iron Dome. It existed before she was a member of Congress. What she and a handful of progressives voted against was further funding for Israel's Iron Dome. And they explained why they voted this way. Rashida Tlaib, for example, who joined Omar in opposing it, stated that she opposed it because giving them money would enable support for Israel's war crimes and human rights abuses committed against the Palestinian people. And she added that the safety of Palestinians should also be considered, considering the fact that they are literally living under a brutal system of apartheid imposed on them by Israel. But he makes it seem as if they voted specifically against the Iron Dome itself because they don't want Israel to have one, therefore they must want Israel to be defenseless, i.e., they must support terrorism effectively. He knows that that's dishonest, and it's especially an egregious lie to spread when they're receiving death threats, specifically because the people calling them think that they are terrorist Muslims. So it's despicable, and he knows what he's doing, but Richie Torres is completely shameless. Now, he is the one member of Congress who represents the poorest district in the country, but yet he wants to give money to Israel that his constituents need, when Israel doesn't need that money. Israel's military is doing just fine. They can already defend themselves. And furthermore, if Israel is able to afford free universal health care for all of its citizens, but we somehow can't, why should our tax dollars go to them? It just doesn't make sense. And if anyone should get funding for an Iron Dome, shouldn't it be Gazans or Palestinians in the West Bank? An Israeli airstrike on the Al-Ansar Mosque in the West Bank, mind you, not in Gaza, killed 2 and injured 3. Where's the calls for their Iron Dome? We're not talking about funding for their Iron Dome. They just don't have one, period. Why is there no concern for them? Again, He doesn't care about Palestinians, so he's never going to ask this question. He makes no mention of Israeli war crimes ever, such as collective punishment and their use of white phosphorus. But when he's accused of supporting a genocide, he turns around and he plays the victim as his colleagues are getting death threats. It's just so despicable. And he is a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus for some reason. I mean, I don't know why he's there when he should join the Freedom Caucus. He'd fit right in since, like him, they support a far-right fascist demagogue. The difference is he's smart enough to realize the danger that ultra-nationalist politics pose at home, but somehow can't understand why it's also dangerous in Israel. But Richie Torres isn't the only Democrat who is indifferent to Palestinian suffering at best. In fact, most Democratic politicians are right in line with what he's saying, but they don't try to make it seem as if they're progressive. The difference is Richie Torres purports to be a progressive and is a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. But there's also so-called progressive in the Senate, John Fetterman, who tweeted out support for bloodshed on Twitter last week, writing, "Now is not the time to talk about a ceasefire. We must support Israel in efforts to eliminate the Hamas terrorists who slaughtered innocent men, women, and children. Hamas does not want peace. They want to destroy Israel. We can talk about a ceasefire after Hamas is neutralized." Now, many people rightfully pointed out, myself included, that in the name of eliminating Hamas, Israel has been indiscriminately slaughtering innocent civilians who had nothing to do with the Hamas attack. 50% of Gazans are children who did not attack Israel, who has nothing to do with Hamas, who can't release the hostages because they're not the ones who took those hostages captive. So not supporting a ceasefire means that you are okay with innocent civilians, many of which are children, dying. And at this point in time, Israel has killed triple the amount that Hamas has killed in that attack on October 7th. This violence is not going to stop Hamas. They've tried this before, and it hasn't. So just indiscriminately killing civilians is not the answer, which is why people are calling for a ceasefire. But John Fetterman says, nope, now is not the time to talk about a ceasefire. Now, his reprehensible comment there was met with fierce pushback, and that's because people are starting to wake up. A ceasefire is the bare minimum supported by 66% of Americans, according to a Data for Progress poll. And that includes 80% of Democrats. But yet he had the audacity to say that now is not the time to talk about a ceasefire, when 80% of Democrats rightfully think this is what should happen right now, because, again, indiscriminate bombing of civilians is not going to eradicate Hamas. You're just punishing people, namely children, who had nothing to do with the disgusting October 7th attacks. Now, he was asked about the backlash that he received in an interview with Pod Save America, and his response here was just straight up incoherent. It was a non-answer, but let's listen.
You called out some of your progressive colleagues this week for blaming the Gaza hospital explosion on Israel, and you said in a statement, quote, "We can talk about a ceasefire after Hamas is neutralized." So what do you say to people, including a lot of Israelis who absolutely agree that Hamas needs to be neutralized, but are worried that a massive ground invasion of Gaza could lead to tens of thousands of more civilian casualties, a bigger war in the Middle East, and ultimately potentially a less secure Israel?
No, it's terrible. It's an awful situation. Absolutely, as well too. And I value my children. I have 3 children. The lives of my children with an Israeli child or a Palestinian child, and all that. I mean, nobody wants civilians. We have to make sure of the welfare of the civilians. But it's to remember that Hamas doesn't want peace. He doesn't want to be negotiated with, they massacred innocent children, women, and now they have over 200 hostages with them right now as well too. So I really believe that I'm always going to decide to stand on the side of Israel, in this place. And also after the hospital tragedy, now we know that it was Islamic Jihad, and they tried to blame it on Israel on top of that as well too, compounding that. And I was disappointed by a lot of the media outlets that now kind of pushed that narrative, coming out immediately saying, well, Hamas says that it was an Israeli rocket, which we all now agree that that wasn't the case.
Notice how there wasn't many claps when he said that he's going to always support Israel. And that's because Democrats know that unequivocally supporting any government, including our own government, isn't a very wise thing to do because the world isn't black and white, right? Governments can do wrong, and oftentimes they do wrong. And especially when this government has been using white phosphorus, has engaged in collective punishment, which is a war crime. Saying that you unequivocally will always support them right now just isn't a very good look. That's why you didn't get applause from Democrats in that audience. Now, he says that, he's mad that Rashida Tlaib jumped to conclusions when it comes to the hospital attack. Now, we still don't know definitively who is responsible for that hospital attack, contrary to popular belief. Now, we don't know. It's okay to say that we don't know. But I don't think that it's insane to think that Israel is lying, considering the fact that they lie all the time. They lied about killing journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. So it's not outrageous to think, oh my God, people think that Israel is lying as they're bombing Gaza. It's ridiculous to me that he's that outraged about people's skepticism here when it's warranted. Now, second of all, he said that Hamas, or should I say Hamas, as he called them, doesn't want peace. Now, that's true, but the Israeli government also does not want peace, hence why they've funded Hamas. And furthermore, if Hamas all of a sudden just started advocating for peace, that wouldn't matter because they're not the ones who are doing an occupation. There is a power imbalance here. Israel has all the power, and they alone can end the occupation, which will facilitate peace. But they're not doing that. So you can acknowledge the role that Hamas plays here, but to just pretend like Israel has no culpability in this entire situation whatsoever. I mean, it's not like this conflict started on October 7th. The occupation has been going on for decades, but he just pretends as if that's not the case. Just strips the nuance and context away from the entire situation. Yes.
Josh Paul, State Department official, has resigned over arms transfer to Israel. Josh Paul spent more than 11 years as the director of congressional and public affairs at the Bureau that oversees arm transfers to foreign nations. The New York Times reports a State Department official in the Bureau that oversees arms transfers resigned this week in protest of the Biden administration's decision to continue sending weapons and ammunition to Israel as it lays siege to Gaza in its war with Hamas. In his resignation letter, Josh Paul, who has been the director of congressional and public affairs for the State Department's Bureau of Political Military Affairs for over 11 years, said the Biden administration's, quote, blind support for one side was leading to policy decisions that were, quote, short-sighted, destructive, unjust, and contradictory to the very values we publicly espouse. Good on this guy. The response Israel is taking, and with it, the American support both for that response and for the status quo of the occupation, will only lead to more and deeper suffering for both Israeli and Palestinian people. That's a key point. It is not just support for the Israeli response. It is support for the status quo of the occupation. Because all the talk out of the government is that the Palestinian people deserve the right to self-determination. They deserve to live in peace and security, as if they were living in peace and security until October 7th, right? That's the level of propaganda that we're dealing with. So it's good that he called that out as well. He added, I fear we are repeating the same mistakes that we have made these past decades, and I decline to be part of it for longer. In an interview, Mr. Paul said that Israel's cutting off of water, food, medical care, and electricity to the Gaza Strip, a region of 2 million people, should prompt protections in a number of longstanding federal laws intended to keep American weapons out of the hands of human rights violators. But those legal guardrails are failing, he said. The problem with all of these provisions is that it rests on the executive branch making a determination that human rights violations have occurred, Mr. Paul said. Exactly. The decision to make a determination doesn't rest with some nonpartisan academic entity, and there's no incentive for the president to actually determine anything. I want to repeat that. There's no incentive for the president to actually determine anything. There's no incentive for Joe Biden to press Netanyahu on the hospital bombing. There's no incentive for Joe Biden to call out the white phosphorus. There's no incentive for him to do that. The United States sees no incentive to actually blow the whistle on war crimes.
Right.
There's nothing in it for them. Joe Biden's on record. Joe Biden said years ago when he was first elected to the Senate, if Israel didn't exist, we would have to invent it. Israel is our proxy in the region, which means there is a conflict of interest here, obviously. I'm not saying anything anybody doesn't know, but the average schmuck watching TV, watching Anthony Blinken at the podium, watching Joe Biden at the podium, they don't know this. There is no incentive for them to tell the truth about this, to call Israel out about this.
Right.
And that's why he is stepping down. Because it's not enough to say, well, we expect them to act in accordance with international law. If there's no incentive to call them out for violating international law, then you're not going to do it. And there's no one there to stop them from doing it. They're the executive branch. Certainly what? The fucking House Republicans are going to impeach him over this? No, they're all in Israel's pocket as well. There's no one home here. There's no one here to fix this. That's the real tragedy of this, is that there's no one around to make this right. Mr. Paul, whose resignation was reported earlier by HuffPost, said that he had seen the U.S. government approve numerous sales or shipments of material to other Middle Eastern countries, even when he believed federal law should have prevented them from going forward. On all of them, there's a moment where you can say, okay, well, you know, it's out of my hands, but I know Congress is going to push back, he said, by issuing a hold on the transfer of grilling officials in hearings at the Capitol. But in this instance, there isn't any significant pushback likely from Congress. That's what I just said. There isn't any other oversight mechanism. There isn't any other forum for debate. And that's part of what got into my decision making. Exactly. The only way for him to start a debate is to do this and try to get as much press out of it as possible. I'm surprised this got as much coverage as it did, to be honest with you. Continuing to give Israel what he described as carte blanche to kill a generation of enemies only to create a new one does not ultimately serve the United States interests, Mr. Paul said. Last slide on this story. What it leads to is this desire to sort of impose security at any cost, including in cost to the Palestinian civilian population, he said, and that doesn't ultimately lead to security. This administration, I think, knows better and understands some of the complexity, but brought very little of that nuance to the policy decisions that are being made. Since posting his resignation letter online Wednesday, Mr. Paul said he had received an outpouring of support from State Department colleagues and congressional staff members, so he's not alone. A lot of people are wrestling with this being the current policy and are finding it to be deeply problematic, he said. I've really been quite moved by some of the folks who have reached out to say that they understand where I'm coming from. They respect my decision. It's been very supportive. So I mentioned the HuffPost initially broke that he resigned, but the HuffPost has been on this for about a week now. So this came out a few days back. On thin ice, some Biden admin staffers feel stifled discussing horrors in Gaza. There's a lot to read here. We won't read all of it. But what this article essentially outlines is the hypocrisy of Joe Biden touting the diversity of his cabinet, the diversity of his decision-making teams, while allowing no ideological diversity at all when it comes to this issue. So this was an article detailing some of the rumblings at the Department of State. And then after this, the follow-up to that article was mutiny brewing inside State Department over Israel-Palestine policy. Morale is low, and some staffers are preparing to formally express their opposition to President Joe Biden's approach, officials told HuffPost. Obviously, this was when Josh Paul announced that he was quitting. Two officials told HuffPost that diplomats are preparing what's called a dissent cable, a document criticizing American policy that goes to the agency's leaders through a protected internal channel. Such cables are seen within the State Department as consequential statements of serious disagreement at key historical moments. The dissent channel was established amid deep internal conflict during the Vietnam War, and diplomats have since then used it to warn that the U.S. is making dangerous and self-defeating choices abroad. The cable would come in the wake of Josh Paul, the aforementioned Josh Paul, a veteran State Department official announcing his resignation on Wednesday. After more than a decade of working on arms deals, he said he could not morally support the U.S.'s moves to supply Israel's war effort. So Russell talks about, rightly so, how they're not able to control the narrative here. They're not even able to control the narrative within their own shop. As you see, everyone, it seems, but Blinken himself, whoever this fucking Uzra Zaya, whatever the hell her name was, who we just watched a few minutes back, the real higher-ups, the real top brass are all in lockstep. But they're having a hard time even controlling their underlings, because this is what happens when you commit the greatest massacre in a generation. This is what happens when you enable and fund and support a world historic human atrocity. Even your own house becomes unruly at that point. And that ought to tell us, I mean, look, it's great that these guys did this. It's great that Josh Paul did this, but that ought to tell you how severe this is, because these are lifers. These are lifers. Right. They would not be walking out unless they understood how dire this was, and unless they said, you know what, I'm never going to be able to sleep at night again if I don't get out of here, if I don't speak up and do something. And in this case, they left, and he got as much press as he could out of it. I hope he gets more press. That's why we felt a strong need to cover this evening. And I hope the word gets out that even the foreign policy stooges are starting to rebel. That's how atrocious what is happening actually is.
Right. And the extended HuffPost article about the resignation.
But speaking of thankfulness, 2 more hostages released yesterday. Of course, so many still held. Axios reporting this morning that Israel is willing to hold back on possible invasions while these negotiations still move forward. We'll take whatever good news we can get out of this grim situation and story. But it's extraordinary that this terrorist group is holding people in their 80s, releasing these women and leaving their 2 husbands in their 80s behind.
Just so brutal.
Yeah, that's reportedly been the counsel from the United States government to Israel, too. Is just wait a little bit. Let's see if we can get these hostages out before you go in. Then Hamas did release 2 more civilians who'd been held for the last 2 weeks more now in Gaza. 2 elderly women freed yesterday. They were handed over to Israeli Defense Forces, taken to the hospital, and then reunited with their families. The women's husbands, as Joe said, who are both in their 80s, are still being held captive. They were kidnapped from their homes when Hamas first attacked on October 7th. In a press conference just moments ago, one of the women, with the help of her daughter, shared details of her capture.
She's saying that many people, a swarm of people, came through the fence. The defense cost 2.5 billion shekels, and it didn't help even a little bit. My mom is saying that she was taken on the back of a motorbike with her body, with her legs on one side and her head on another side, that she was taken through the plowed fields with a man in front on one side and a man behind her, and that while she was being taken, she was hit by sticks by Shabab people. Until they reached the tunnels. There they walked for a few kilometers on the wet ground. There are a huge network of tunnels underneath. It looks like a spider web.
So this is the second hostage release since the war began. An American mother and daughter were freed on Friday. Still, Israeli officials believe more than 200 people remain captive inside Gaza. Hamas, Qatar, Egypt, and Israel have been negotiating a proposal to release a larger group of hostages in exchange for a steady flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. That's according to 3 officials familiar with the talks who tell the Wall Street Journal. Hamas, however, is demanding Israel allow fuel deliveries into Gaza, but Israel fears the terrorist group may divert the supply and use for their own military purposes or to launch attacks into Israel. Let's bring in NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel. He is live in Jerusalem this morning. Richard, what more do we know about the release of these 2 women, 179, 185, and this broader strategy by Hamas?
So you just played some of that extraordinary.
Actually, let's stop it here. Welcome to a what's today? Tuesday edition of Straight Out of Politics. I'm your host for today. I'm CJ. That CJ stands for Compton J. Oh shit, I'm all off-centered here. Didn't paying attention. That CJ stands for Compton J, or J in real life. We have. It feels like we're talking about Israel every day, which we are, but it doesn't feel like burnout. It feels like just progressive coverage. And I don't mean progressive in political. I mean progressing chronological coverage of it is a better way of saying it, I guess. And we have a lot of clips to get to, but what's happening, I guess the overall, and I'll bring up the graphic, the overall idea of this stream, so it would be many different segments, but the stream more broadly, we're talking about Genocide Joe is paying for the cost for Israel. So his position on Israel, when it comes to election, he's going to be paying for it. And he's also paying for it geopolitically because this could ignite a Middle East war. So the stance of being on the side of Zionism is costing the empire quite a lot. And we're going to get to it. But just to go over the graphic, costing Joe Biden the election, the stance on Israel. That's why we got Joe Biden and Donald Trump there, because that's the alternative. And then above Donald Trump, you see King of Jordan, who put out a fantastic speech, a pro-Palestinian speech we're going to be covering. And below Joe Biden there, you see the hostage that they were just referring to. And it's curious what they chose to show her speaking, because she says a lot more, including good things about Hamas and not so good things about Israel, or at least the Israeli soldiers. So it's very curious that they're doing that. But let's listen to the rest of this. With this correspondent out there, because he has to, because he's out there on the ground. So what he's seeing, he has to sort of soften up for this audience that's very neocon and very anti-Palestinian. So let's listen.
Our press conference that we just heard, an 85-year-old woman, tough woman, who just was released last night and is already speaking to reporters, describing her experiences, speaking through with the help of a family member. And she described how she was taken on the back of that motorcycle after Hamas fighters broke into her kibbutz, started looting. She was thrown on the back of this bike and then taken into these tunnels. She said she was kept there with other prisoners, that Hamas seemed well prepared. They had shampoo and other toiletries ready. They replaced and cleaned the toilets. That they chose not to discuss politics with her. She even shook their hands when she left, not because she liked them or enjoyed this experience, of course not, but because they treated her decently.
You see the softening of the language. I got more footage to show everybody where you're going to see the contrast when you're not on corporate media or you're not a part of a corporate entity. In this sense, where you're advocating it so publicly for one side. But I do have some more footage to kind of counter some of the things he's saying here.
So an extraordinary count of her ordeal. But of course, Israel says there are about 220 hostages who remain in Gaza, still in captivity, including the husbands of these two women. I know that negotiations to free more hostages are ongoing. There had been some hope yesterday to free a larger group, and those discussions are continuing through the mediation of Qatar and Egypt. Overall, the military and humanitarian situation is still heading toward escalation, with Israel continuing its airstrikes, talking about about 400 targets, more than 400 targets struck in the last 24 hours in Gaza. And aid workers in Gaza say unless they can get that fuel in, of course, there is a concern that it will be diverted to Hamas. But aid workers from a variety of organizations are saying unless some fuel can get in, generators are going to run out of their reserve supplies at hospitals, and then incubators, respirators, other kinds of equipment will not be able to function. Diplomatic efforts underway. French President Macron arrived, so we are still seeing diplomatic activity, but so far no breakthroughs.
So, Richard, publicly anyway, the Biden administration is saying the IDF, Prime Minister Netanyahu, they make their own military decisions. At NBC, we're reporting behind the scenes, the Biden administration is advising Israel to hold back on its ground invasion, to get these hostages out first, and to get humanitarian aid in there. What's your sense of those negotiations, and how long will Israel really wait?
Well, I think we're seeing a bit of posturing here. If the Israeli military, if it wanted to go in and was fully determined that it needed to go in, it would. It would not listen to the United States. It would not be held back. If it had a plan and it felt that the time was right to execute it, it would go ahead. But I think the United States, as its closest ally.
So that's him soft telling us that in no way is Israel prepared for any sort of invasion into Gaza. That's them softly acknowledging us to the public. And I have a clip I'm going to play soon. I think it was, it was Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter, and they're going to kind of break this part down. But let's listen a little more, because they talk about this a little more. Then I'll start to play some of these counter items that I have here.
Is urging caution, is doing so in a way that is publicly acknowledged, that does give the Israeli government a little bit of breathing room, because the people here are angry. They are furious. They want to see a military response, and they want to.
The people are angry, are furious. So those innocent civilians are demanding bloodshed. The innocent civilians are demanding a genocide from their government. They've already killed something like 3 times the amount of people that was killed on October 7th. That's not enough. 3 times is not enough. But the innocent civilians is demanding blood. Okay, let's continue.
See it now. So now if this government can say, we are attacking, we are working, we are freeing some hostages, and our allies are pushing for time, it does give them a bit more space to come up with a plan. Because going into Gaza is not going to be easy. Just going back to this tunnel story where these hostages are being held. And I spoke to a senior Hamas official yesterday who said the hostages are being held in multiple locations. I personally have been in tunnels in Gaza, not these fighting tunnels, in smuggling tunnels, but the entire Gaza Strip is flat. It's along the sea, so the ground is quite soft and sandy. And for years, Palestinians have been digging networks of tunnels, and they are extraordinarily deep. You have one tunnel leading to another. There are many different layers to them. It is an entire labyrinth.
They would be, in the words of Scott Ritter, they would be walking into a trap being slaughtered. I'm going to let this play a little more, and then I'll bring up this other receipt that I have here. But let's let him finish at least the reporting out there.
Under Gaza. So in order to deal with that, it is going to take not just 2 weeks of planning, like Israel's had right now in response to these attacks that took place on October 7th.
You noticing how he's stuttering? You notice how he's stuttering? But it's just what the video I'm going to show you in just a second. It's just what Scott Ritter said on Garland Nixon show, where he said, like, these reservists, they're not prepared for any sort of fighting like this. Because you got to think about it. If you go into enemy territory, this is constant fighting. There's not like, oh, it's break time. It's constant fighting while you're there. So let me bring it up. Let me just cue it up into a better spot here. Let's gets past some of this introductory part. And okay, so I think I have it in a good spot. Let's switch out to the other video. We're going to come back to this because there's a lot of things that to play there on Morning Joe. And the reason, again, if you're brand new to the show or brand new to the network, the reason we use a lot of Morning Joe, because Morning Joe is the cable news show for the establishment. So what you're seeing, they're not talking to us. They're talking to the bigwigs. They're talking to the donors. That's who that show is for. So that's why it's important that we analyze that show, to a lesser degree, the Rachel Maddow show. And there might be a couple of other shows that I'm missing right now, but let's listen for Garland and Scott to address the part about this Israeli invasion into Gaza that they've been saying is going to happen. Oh, it was the weather this time, and this is the hostage. It's because they're not prepared for the type of fighting. Like, are you sure you understand what you're going to have to do here? So let's listen.
Let's get straight to it. Middle East. Oh, before we do, everyone, don't forget, ScottRitterExtra.com is Scott's website. So all of Scott's good works, you can find at ScottRitterExtra.com.
Pause it just right there and scoot past that. All right. Now, let's go.
Potential in Israeli physical invasion, guys on foot going into Gaza for a fight, and what that means. And do you think it's going to happen?
Well, first of all, let's just talk about the fight itself. We're talking about urban warfare in a densely populated. Even if they depopulate it, it's densely populated with structures. Many of these structures will have been destroyed, which means now you've made movement through this area even more complicated for the Israelis. The Hamas has planned this operation to a T. Please, people, don't disrespect Hamas's professionalism.
So to the point that the first point, or one of the first points he made, didn't think of that yesterday when I heard this. I don't know how I missed that, but they're going to be having to sift through rubble to get to the ground so that they can get through the ground to the tunnel. Sitting ducks. So what we're hearing in public, what they're projecting as, oh, we're being nice. Let's just let some hostages out. That's why we're not going in. No. If it was no hostages, and if it was great weather, I'm not sure they still would have launched any sort of invasion, because people are saying, do you understand these people that you just called up from reserves? 2-3 weeks of training, that ain't gonna cut it. These are gonna have to be very specialized people. And let's listen some more to Scott.
You can sit there and call them a terrorist organization. You can accuse them of every crime ever done to humanity. Some of your accusations are probably true.
I'm not here to, to embrace Hamas and sing their praises. But I respect the fact that these guys carried out one of the more professional military operations in modern history. This surprise attack against an Israeli military that was supposed to be impervious to surprise attack. I mean, they built this system to avoid just what happened. They have a wall put up full of technology designed to prevent tunneling from underneath. They have sensors, they have cameras, motion detectors, the whole thing. They have automated cannons so that if something happens, the alarm goes off, the lights come on, the cannon automatically orients, and then some dude sitting in a room far removed with a mouse points and clicks and kills everything. This wasn't supposed to happen, but Hamas did it. They did it by identifying every aspect of the Israeli position and coming up with a solution to it. If you have surveillance cameras, build a drone, fly the drone into the camera, blow it up. If you have cannons mounted, blow them up. Identify the breach in the wall, come through the wall, assault through the position by knocking off communication so they can't communicate to others. Pick a day when everybody is on holiday. They had maps exactly where we wanted to go, aerial maps. So they've been flying drones over Israel, taking happy snaps. They had the maps, they had the intelligence, they had everything labeled where it wanted, where the officers lived, where the prime targets lived. They knew where all the secret military installations were, the intelligence buildings, etc. They did this attack. They're very good, which means that they have planned the whole thing. Remember, they snatched over 200 hostages, brought them back, and integrated them into their system, their network. Why? Because they want Israel to attack. They want Israel to come into Gaza. This isn't a case of Hamas saying, oh, no, please don't come. Please don't come. Understand, they had a meeting with the Iranians in Qatar, the political wing, and the Iranians were like, hey, we can come in if you need us. And Hamas like, nah, boss, we got this. We're good. We got this all under control. And they do. They want Israel to come in because they have prepared the ambushes of ambushes. When Israel comes in, they will be hit with, improvised explosive devices, except these aren't improvised. They're deliberate. They've been designed for what they want to accomplish. Every square meter as Israel advances, things are going to go boom. Israelis are going to die. Israelis are going to get wounded. They're going to come in to evacuate the wounded. While they're evacuating the wounded, Hamas is going to come up through a tunnel behind them, slaughter them, grab more prisoners, go back down underground, blow that tunnel so Israel can't pursue.
They're not ready for this. They are absolutely not ready for any sort of invasion into Gaza where your enemy has spent years digging out this massive, very intricate tunnel system. Do we think that Hamas, do we think they didn't think ahead that, hey, when we do this attack, we know what's going to come, right? Doesn't look good. Let's listen to a little more, then we'll get back to the Joe. We'll get back to the Morning Joe video, and then I'll insert a couple of more receipts.
To go into a different tunnel network altogether and repeat and rinse and repeat, and it's going to happen, and Israel's going to just get slaughtered trying to move into an ambush that evolves as they come in. Now, can Israel win this? It's a tough thing. You'd need highly professional troops, people that have been training to do this, meaning that as you advance forward, you have people behind you on watch looking for the people popping up. You've coordinated, you've spaced it, you've gone in with technology, the bulldozers to clear the way, you're doing MICLICs, you're firing your explosive charges to blow up devices, you're going in with ground penetrating radar looking for the tunnels to advance. It takes a lot of coordination, a lot of training, a lot of preparation. The military that Israel's assembled here isn't that military. They have 1 or 2 brigades that could do this job, except you know what? They haven't been doing this job. What had they been doing? They've been down in the West Bank, beating up 10-year-old boys, brutalizing 15-year-old girls, and shooting unarmed 6-year-old men in the belly. That's what they've been doing for the past decade. They haven't been preparing for this kind of fighting. This kind of fighting is full-time job. You've got to be doing it all the time. They haven't. So even their regular, their active duty brigades, they can't do it. They don't have anybody who can do this. Their special forces can do this in limited fashion, but guess what? They're getting slaughtered as we speak. Sayat Matkal has suffered around 20% casualties already. Same thing with their SEAL team, the Flotilla 13 boys. They've taken heavy casualties. Shaldog, their Air Force commandos, heavy casualties.
So what they're projecting on TV as all these other reasons really boils down to they're not prepared for any sort of invasion. And in several ways, not just in the ways logistically of accomplishing your mission, they're also not prepared for the repercussions that come with all the thousands of innocent Palestinian civilians, and the world it will come rain down on them. If you think like right now, you're seeing a lot of activism against this genocide all over the world. And I believe that's the reason why you see a lot of pushback, more than you would normally see from the media. For example, the interview with Anthony Blinken on Face the Nation, where Margaret Brennan was pushing back about this incursion. And then you're seeing report after report saying that and I think they're going to say it in the Morning Joe video. Let me go back to that. In the Morning Joe video, I think they allude to, or at least speak to, there's a emergency vehicle going by. I don't know if you can hear it, but let me hold off. Paramedics. So anyway, they're going to allude to the point that I was making. Let me wait for them to make that point.
There's nothing quick and easy about this, that's for sure. NBC News Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel in Jerusalem this morning. Richard, thanks so much. Mika?
As Richard reported, the Biden administration is advising Israel to delay a ground invasion of Gaza to allow for more time for hostage negotiations and humanitarian aid to reach there. That's according.
So they're telling them to delay. The reason she just told us is this is bullshit. Okay? That's the delay, and then they're disguising it as I'm this great person. Look what I'm trying to do. Okay? There's disguising this is on hold because the United States is in the background saying, you know what's about to happen here? And one of the guests on this show is going to go into that softly. Again, they have to softly do this. And this is what to me speaks to the activism. The reason they're even having to kind of even address the Palestinian side, address what's going to be happening is because you're seeing the protest as big as it is now. Imagine when all the footage come out of tens of thousands of more dead bodies, died bodies upon bodies. Whole cities where there's not even survivors to even take care of the bodies. Not going to be a good look. But let's listen to a little more.
To 4 U.S. officials. However, officials stress the U.S. is not dictating operations for the Israeli.
They have to stress that, which means it's probably likely quite that. It's the same thing as saying unprovoked war. Oh, it's probably provoked then. The fact that you have to insert a thought instruction right before the word, it kind of tells, it's kind of a telltale sign, but let's listen.
Defense forces. Yet the Pentagon has sent a 3-star Marine general and other officers to help advise the Israelis on the challenges in fighting an urban war. This comes as senior administration officials tell the New York Times the White House is concerned Israel lacks achievable military objectives in Gaza, and that
I thought it was the hostage. You see how they say one thing and then they also tell you the rest of the story, but they try to frame it like this is not the real reason. This is just repercussions. But if you see that headline, it says U.S. raises concern about Israel's plan of action in Gaza. This is the New York Times, the paper of record, aka paper of lies and atrocious, misleading, omitting stories. But this is what they're saying about this is what they're reporting, which means that this is probably the top thing on the State Department's mind right now is trying to stop Israel from going in and committing this disaster. Let's continue. Oh, let me just try that way.
That the IDF is not yet ready to launch a ground invasion with a plan that can work.
And of course, that's the key, Richard, the plan that can work. We've been hearing so much about how difficult it would be for Israel to go into Gaza to achieve what military goals they end up having, which takes us really back to your Wall Street Journal op-ed where you talked about a two-phased approach.
So this guy right here who's on Morning Joe, he's by far their most frequently appearing guest. And he's writing op-eds for the Washington Journal or for Washington Post or whatever he said, New York Times, one of the corporate corrupt papers. This guy has a lot of voice in who is he? And I'm guaranteed this guy, to me, it reeks of intelligence. He reeks of being part of an intelligence apparatus, either directly, a cutout, something. Because why is he always here on the establishment show speaking? Who are you to be at the forefront with the mic so often? And it's almost like he's there to give Morning Joe advice, to tell you, no, let me tell you what's really going on. Like, he is almost like he's the regional manager and Joe and Mika are just the store manager. He's not there every day like Mika and Joe, but when he does arrive, they're absolutely listening to him as if he is, or as if they are his subordinate.
Approach. The fact that they're not quite ready to do that, the fact that negotiations continue to move forward, the fact that Joe Biden went to the region and said, hold on, don't make the same mistakes we made after 9/11. It really, what's happening right now, thus far, it could change in an hour, fits into your two-phased approach, which is first, stabilize the situation, make sure that a bad situation doesn't deteriorate further. And secondly, you do that with peace in mind. Do it in such a way, David Ignatius has also said this, where peace with the Saudis is possible, peace with Palestinians who want to turn their back on terrorism also possible. So
peace with Palestinians, peace with all these Arab nations because they want to normalize. This is a step. That's a normalization is a major step for a colonial settler project. So that is top priority. So they're saying you need to do this in a way that doesn't do this. But I think it's too late. And we're going to get to the video of King Jordan, what he put out. Based on that video, and maybe I'll show it sooner than later, it might be too late for that. It may be too late. But let's listen to this intelligence guy right here speak.
Given what you wrote this weekend, where we are today, how do you think things are moving forward?
It's interesting, Joe. Things have slowed down a little bit. And what we're seeing is that the hostages, and by the way, the hostages were not somehow a sideshow for Hamas. Hostages were an integral part of their strategy. And what we're seeing is the slow release of them. Hamas is trying to buy time. So that's one situation. And obviously, Israel is loath to go in while hostages are being released in decent health. The United States is worried about American hostages. So that slows things down. There's all the negotiations, as you said, about aid. But I think what quietly is happening is U.S. defense officials are spending a lot of time with their Israeli counterparts and basically saying, do you really understand how hard this is? And there's two phases. One is actually, and you've been talking about it here, the military phase of urban close-in combat. It's just a nightmare, particularly since Hamas will know the terrain better than anybody. And then what the Americans are saying, it's a little bit of from our experience in places like Afghanistan, just say we're wrong and you're right. Just say things go a little bit better than we anticipate. What then? To whom do you hand off authority? There's no other authority right now.
You see how he speaks with he doesn't speak in questions. He doesn't speak in conversational thought. He speaks in, I'm telling you, this is what it is. He speaks in a PowerPoint presentation sort of way. This is why it says he's intelligent, because he speaks as if he knows these things for sure, like you're part of intelligence, meaning know these perspectives as being the perspectives, the way he's analyzing this situation is as if he knows this is what the U.S. believes. It's very it's information with authority that I know that this is what it is.
Other than Hamas, there's no one else in Gaza. The idea that the people who can't run the West Bank are going to run Gaza, that's preposterous. The Egyptians and other Arabs want no part of it. The UN is feckless. So what else do you have to work with? The idea that you can go in, clean them out, hand it over and walk out, it's just a pipe dream. And that's the Israeli problem. So my hunch is, as emotions are intense, but what's happening, I think, is the hard thinking of foreign policy is kicking in. There'd be nothing worse. Think about it. Could you imagine anything worse for Israel than it went in big? And then 3 weeks or 3 months later, they said, this isn't working. And then that almost would add a failure on top of a failure. So I think you're having a little bit of slowing down here.
Well, I mean, they're guaranteed, even if they have a, quote, successful military operation in Gaza, they're guaranteed to find themselves back in the same situation they were in 2005, where they said, we don't want to govern this place. And so then they'll have to leave. And again, this goes back to what we've been talking about, fight the war with peace in mind.
Right.
They have to fight the war against Hamas in such a way that other Arab countries will come in with the United Nations, with the United States, with other parties, and have a peacekeeping force there if that's possible. Caddy, there is a real give and take though here. Let's say a push and pull. You have the
She's gonna. Well, I'll let it play. Actually, I'll let it play. Let's let it play.
Israeli people rightly enraged by the rapes, the mass atrocities, the beheadings, the execution of babies, the burning of children. You have that where the Israelis don't want to sit back and wait. They want justice. And then you have on the other side the world community that's sort of pulling back at Israel, telling them to wait, telling them to be patient.
The world community that he's talking about is all of that worldwide protest that all of us saw. The worldwide protest is what he's speaking to, and I'm telling you that is absolutely involved in all of these nations and the way they're reacting, along with the United States in the background, trying to say, hey, hold up on this shit here. Because if you think just the reaction of what you guys have done already, look at this. This is not a good situation that Israel has put in the United States and Joe Biden in right now. Let's listen.
Obviously are going to get even more afraid right now, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You've got President Macron of France flying into Israel today, the latest in a string of world leaders to go and try to do two things: talk about hostages and try to put some restraint on the Israelis, particularly when it comes to those images in Gaza. I spoke to General Petraeus last week, and you discussed him on the show.
You see how they talk about Palestinian deaths? You see how they skip over the actual killing part? Listen to how she's talking about deaths in the way that let's listen, just listen.
Of world leaders to go and try to do two things: talk about hostages and try to put some restraint on the Israelis, particularly when it comes to those images in Gaza.
put some restraint on Israel, particularly because of those images coming out of Gaza. That's how they're describing a genocide.
Gaza. I spoke to General Petraeus last week, and you discussed him on the show yesterday, and he lays out that challenge of, clear, hold, build. Each one of those 3 steps in the case of Gaza is infinitely harder than it was even in Mosul for General Petraeus. This is, clearing Gaza is really difficult. Holding it, again, what do you do with this? They don't want to hold on to this. And then building it. And I think it's interesting that you've got a kind of coordinated message publicly and privately coming from the Americans at the moment. That statement by Barack Obama last night was very clear to the Israelis that
I'll play that
we
Obama
stand with
clip
you,
or
but
his statement
if
in a
you
second.
have all of these images of, potentially, I'm hearing tens of thousands of people being killed in Gaza during a land invasion, then that could set back the Israeli cause, echoing Tom Friedman's,
What Israeli cause? You mean the colonial settler project? Is that what you mean? So she's basically saying we can't do this, or she's basically saying the international world, including the United States, is saying, hey, this is not a good idea. And the real actual person, some say, that's actually running the country did make a statement. And let's go to that statement. Let's insert it here since she brings it up. I believe I put it here. I believe I put it in here under hostage. Obama. Got a lot of receipts to get to. It was the Obama statement. Maybe it's not under here. It could be under... Anyway, I'll just type it. I had to save. I have it saved somewhere where I don't remember Barack Obama, because I do want to read part of the statement. It's an extremely long statement, but we will read part of it to cover, because if Obama's putting this out, that this is the establishment, because they need a coherent person to put something out like this. And just give me a second to find it. They need a coherent person, and he's a coherent person that can articulate such a thing. And people know that if Joe Biden put out a statement like this, nobody would believe that it's from him. I'll read it from here, actually, instead of going to Obama. Let's read it. This is what Obama says. Barack Obama writes, "It's been 17 days since Hamas launched its horrific attack against Israel, killing over..." Hang on a second here. I do want to update this so I know for editing purposes. This one here. Yeah. All right. So now let's read Obama's statement. My bad. Barack Obama writes, "It's been 17 days since Hamas launched its horrific attack against Israel, killing over 1,400 Israeli citizens, including defenseless women, children, and elderly. In the aftermath of such unspeakable brutality, the U.S. government and the American people have shared in the grief of families, prayed for the return of loved ones, and rightly declared solidarity with the Israeli people." It goes on, "As I stated in an earlier post, Israel has the right to defend its citizens against such wanton violence, and I fully support President Biden's call for the United States to support our long-time ally in going after Hamas, dismantling its military capabilities and facilities, and the safe return of hundreds of hostages to their families." But this is where he shifts. So first, you just like with any statement that's going to come with any criticism from an ally, you got to butter him up. we agree with you. Yeah, we're down. And that's what he did in the beginning of his statement. But then he goes on and says, but even as we support Israel, we should also be clear that how Israel prosecutes this fight against Hamas matters. In particular, it matters as President Biden has repeatedly emphasized that the Israeli military strategy abide by international law, including those that seek to avoid to every extent possible the death or suffering of civilian populations. Let me pause here. Now, you heard this talked about on Morning Joe. You've seen us talk about corporate media talk about it this way. Isn't that a tale that you know that Israel is slaughtering people? Why would all these people keep bringing it up and bringing it up so often unless you know that they're slaughtering people? So the United States understands that Israel's indiscriminately slaughtering people, but still is covering for them. That's the tale, but let's continue. Upholding these values is important for its own sake because it is morally just and reflects our belief in the inherent value of every human life. Upholding these values is also vital for building alliances and shaping international opinion, all of which are critical for Israel's long-term security. So this is really where we're zooming in, this last part, but even more narrower, this part. Upholding values is also vital for building alliances. They're talking about Jordan. They're talking about normalizing Israel and shaping international opinion. They're talking about the protests in London, the protests in Chicago, LA, New York, and Boston, in Florida. I mean, I'm trying to think in KC because all of the RBN members have been to one, except for me. All of which are critical for Israel's long-term security. So this to me is the establishment publicly shouting to Israel, you need to think about what you're doing before you go in and do, I'm trying to find the right word, because it's coming from a colonialist telling another colonialist, don't do too much, but it's a colonialist conversation. So too much in itself, the phrase is on a sliding scale. You get what I'm saying? Like too much to them and too much to us aren't the same thing. But anyway, now let me show you the video from the King of Jordan. King of Jordan, right here. It's a great speech he gives, but this is what Barack Obama is speaking to because Israel, this conflict and their reaction, because the Middle East is already ramping up for something that's going to be popping off. That's without the invasion even going on yet. And according to this speech that we're just about to hear, do I have a caption here for him? According to this speech that we're going to hear from the King of Jordan, I think I do. This is a red line at this point. Palestinians are a red line. King Jordan, King of Jordan. Let's listen to this speech from the King of Jordan.
My friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is how Muslims and Arabs greet others, with a wish for the other to be blessed with peace and the mercy of God. Our region came with a message of peace, the Pact of Omar, issued at the gates of Jerusalem almost 15 centuries ago, more than 1,000 years before the Geneva Conventions, ordered Muslim soldiers not to kill a child, a woman, or an old person, not to destroy a tree, not to harm a priest, not to destroy a church. Those are the rules of engagement that Muslims must accept and abide by, as all those who believe in our common humanity. All civilian lives matter. My friends, I am outraged and grieved by those acts of violence waged against innocent civilians in Gaza, in the West Bank, and Israel. The relentless bombing campaign underway in Gaza, as we speak, is cruel and unconscionable on every level. It is collective punishment of a besieged and helpless people. It is a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. It is a war crime. Yet the deeper the crisis cuts of cruelty, the less the world seems to care. Anywhere else, attacking civilian infrastructure and deliberately starving an entire population of food, water, electricity, and basic necessities would be condemned. Accountability would be enforced immediately, unequivocally. And it has been done before, recently, in another conflict, but not in Gaza. It's been 2 weeks since Israel put in place the complete siege of the Gaza Strip, and still, for the most part, global silence. Yet the
This is what the United States doesn't want to have happen. This right here. This is one of the things they've been fearing about Israel's approach to their colonial settler project. The violence that would have been acceptable back when the United States did it is no longer acceptable because we have the internet. And these Arab countries coming together in support of Palestine and explicitly talking about how you don't seem to care about Palestinian lives the same way you care about Israeli lives is a problem. And now we have to understand Jordan is an ally to the United States. For Jordan to say Israel is committing war crimes by inflicting collective punishment, this is a big deal. So when I said, and let me put that caption back up, Israel is costing not only Joe Biden the election, and I'm going to get to some receipts about that. There's an article about that. There's an article in The Nation where there's an African-American author who's writing, you need to see what you're doing, Joe Biden. Check what you're doing. Because if you keep going down this line of staunch support for Israel, you're going to be losing the very people you need, which is Black and brown supporters. That's an article in The Nation. We'll get to that, but let's listen to this here.
message the Arab world is hearing is loud and clear. Palestinians' lives matter less than Israeli ones. Our lives matter less than our lives. The application of international law is optional, and human rights have boundaries. They stop at borders, they stop at races, and they stop at religions. That is a very, very dangerous message, as the consequences of continued international apathy and inaction will be catastrophic on us all. My friends, we cannot let raw emotions dictate the moment. Our priorities today are clear and urgent. First, an immediate end to the war in Gaza, the protection of civilians, and the adoption of a unified position that indiscriminately condemns the targeting of all civilians in line with our shared values and international law, which loses all value if it is implemented selectively. Second, the sustained and uninterrupted delivery of humanitarian aid, fuel, food, and medicines to the Gaza Strip. Third, the unequivocal rejection of the forced displacement or internal displacement of the Palestinians.
That's going to be a problem. This is why a lot of people say there's a conflict that's unavoidable. The forced displacement, internally or externally, of Palestinians is not acceptable. It's one of the demands. They can't accomplish their colonial project with that.
A war crime, according to international law, and a red line for all of us.
Let me repeat that part because I was talking over it, the red line part. Let me go back. I'll go back at least 15 seconds here. Right here, yeah, 15 seconds.
Displacement or internal displacement.
My bad. Let's go back 20 seconds because I do want to hear the displacement part. So let's go back here.
Food and medicines to the Gaza Strip. Third, the unequivocal rejection of the forced displacement or internal displacement of the Palestinians. This is a war crime, according to international law, and a red line for all of us.
The forced displacement is a red line for all of us. How is that resolved? How can Israel implement its colonial settler project and complete it if it's a red line, and how are they going to be normalized? How those three things don't go together. They don't match. So let's go back slightly and then let them finish out.
This is a war crime, according to international law, and a red line for all of us. This conflict, my friends, did not start 2 weeks ago, and it will not stop if we continue down this blood-soaked path. We know all too well that it will only lead to more of the same, a zero-sum game of death and destruction, of hatred and hopelessness played on repeat. Today, Israel is literally starving civilians in Gaza, but for decades, Palestinians have been starved of hope, of freedom, and a future. Because when the bombs stop falling, Israel is never held accountable. The injustices of occupation continue, and the world walks away until the next round of violence. The bloodshed we are witnessing today is the price of that, of failing to make tangible progress towards a political horizon that brings peace for Palestinians and Israelis alike. Israeli leadership must realize that there is no military solution to its security concerns, that it cannot continue to sideline the 5 million Palestinians living under its occupation, denied of their legitimate rights, and the Palestinian lives are no less valuable than Israeli lives. The Israeli leadership must realize, once and for all, that a state can never thrive if it is built on the foundations of injustice. Over the past 15 years, we have seen how the dreams of a two-state solution and the hopes of an entire generation have turned into despair. This has been the policy of hardline Israeli leadership to focus solely on security over peace and create new illegal realities on the ground that render an autonomous Palestinian state unviable. In the process, it has empowered extremists on both sides. But we must not, we cannot write off this conflict as too far gone for the sake of both the Palestinians and the Israelis. Our collective unified message to the Israeli people should be, we want a future of peace and security for you and for the Palestinians, where your children and Palestinian children should no longer live in fear. It is our duty as the international community to do whatever it takes to restart a meaningful political process that can take us to a just and sustainable peace on the basis of the two-state solution.
So that's an ally of the United States giving a speech about a red line that another, I would say, closer ally of the United States is violating right now and will continue to violate. So how is this going to be resolved without any conflict, without any war? I ain't seeing it right now unless some of you see it. And before I get back to, I don't know why this is sticking. Before I get back to the Morning Joe clip, let's go through some of my other receipts here. I'm going to start down here at the bottom. This one, The Nation. Biden's Israel-Palestine policy could cost him the election. The president's blank check support of Israel's war on Gaza is alienating many of the black and brown voters he needs to win re-election. And that's from the guy Eli Mystical or Mistel. He appears on The View a couple of times. He says good things sometimes, but then he's still part of the Democratic Party apparatus. And this is Nick saying with the caption, good, any person who votes for Genocide Joe is complicit if you are black or brown. Oops. Pop up here. Especially you are a sellout of the highest order. And I'm going to read that actual article in a minute, but I'm showing you where Joe Biden, showing you how Israel, his stance on Israel is costing him. This is where he would be costing him at the election with this title. Let me see here. This is another one that will be costing him because of the election. The man broke my heart. That's a quote from an Arab American booster. From Biden's Arab American boosters begin to leave his side. And we'll cover, I'll show you I'll show you that the articles for both of those in just a moment. But before I do that, I do want to show you this, because this is why this is bad news to align yourself with the Israeli government and their occupation and then, of course, their invasion into Gaza. Let's listen to this fellow Zionist in this video. Let me see if I should prep it. Yeah, let's do that. Just in case anybody wants to. It says, we will never forgive the Arabs for forcing us to kill their babies. So, yeah, that's the quote. So let's listen.
I don't recall one occupation in which the occupier presents himself as the victim. Not only the victim, the only victim. If to phrase here, if to quote here the late Golda Meir, whom I quoted also last time, I know, but it is so unforgettable, I have to use it again. She once said that we will never forgive the Arabs for forcing us to kill their children. We are the victims. We are forced.
We're never going to forgive the Arabs for forcing us to kill your kids. What? What you say? Unhinged, just nonsense. But this is a losing side to be on. And that's exactly what the United States and Joe Biden administration is on.
To kill their children. Poor us. And as the victim and the only victim in history, again, it enables us the rights to do whatever we want, and nobody is going to tell us what to do because we are the only victims. To this, there is a third very deep-rooted value, and this is the very deep belief. Again, everyone will deny it, but if you scratch under the skin of almost every Israeli, you'll find it there. The Palestinians are not equal human beings like us. They are not like us. They don't love their children like us. They don't love life like us. They were born to kill. They are cruel. They are sadists. They have no values, no manners.
That sounds very similar to a lot of the things that were said about Black people.
I don't recall
during
one occupation.
Jim Crow. Savages. Not worthy of human life, not like us. Sounds very, very similar. I do want to show some more receipts. And here's one of them. Like I said, I spoke about costing him here an election. I spoke about the Arab American boosters. I spoke about the Black and Brown, losing Black and Brown voter article. That's all here. That's domestically. Internationally, U.S. inflames war throughout the Middle East. Oops. I think my mouse power is running out, so I have to do it this way. So let's read a little snippet of what I have here. And I'll get a mouse maybe when I get to another video because my mouse just clunked out right now. I'll see if it has a little more juice in it in a second. But let's read this here. Okay, the Biden administration, this is from the article, the Biden administration has given its full support for Israel's genocide against the Palestinians, which is taking place through the mass bombing of civilians, killing between 300 to 400 people every single day, as well as deliberate starvation and dehydration of the population. At the same time, it's providing the weapons with which Israel is simultaneously carrying out attacks on Lebanon, Syria, and the West Bank. Israel's genocide against the Palestinians using American weapons and with American political, military, and logistic support is just one component of the U.S. military's escalation through the region. Just astonishing to me. Do I not have the link? I guess I don't have the link. Just astonishing to me that that's the case. But got another headline for you. Do I have another one in here? I don't, but I had another receipt. My bad. Maybe I said it the wrong way. I think maybe it's in here. Oh, okay. Here we go. Now, here is, and this is Nick prefacing it the right way here. He says, Palestinians are fighting for their sovereignty. Israel is the only party that is out of compliance with international law. You saw King Jordan in a previous video talking about this. The armed resistance of Hamas and Palestinians is 100% legal due to Israel stealing their sovereignty. These are basic facts Zionists can't deal with. And let's listen to this. This is a correspondent just detailing the breakdown of Palestinian life in the Gaza Strip. So let's listen. 400 Palestinian children in the Gaza Strip applied for special, I guess, like a travel permit to get medical treatment. Children, they were all denied. But then you got people say everything is fine. It's not a big deal. Let's listen a little more to what meaning, let me clarify. You know, that the West Bank is this and the Gaza Strip, yes, it's bad conditions, but it's not that bad, really. It's people that minimize what the Palestinians are going through on a daily basis, and she details was the classification.
That's what the UN. So we've seen.
So another great receipt. I saw it. I think I saw it with Nico House first, even though I saved Nick ones because Nick had a little more to say in his caption. But cover that one. And now I'm going to get to a couple of other receipts here. I'm going to cover that later. So those two I'll cover. Where is it? Versus Israel. I'm looking for. Oh, right here. This to me is the pressure. This to me is the pressure. And I'm going to show you. Is this the case? This is all of these events is what pressured the United States and some of the reaction that we're seeing. I'll put this one up here. This is some of the protests. This is some of the protests that happened over this past weekend. Just massive amounts of people. This is Sydney, Australia. So this is Sydney, Australia. I'll just show you a couple here. This one, not hundreds, not thousands, but tens of thousands flooded DC streets this morning. So what do you think all these people, how do you think they're going to be voting in November? When it comes down to, I hit the wrong button. How do you think they're going to vote, Joe Biden? So this also speaks to how the stance that he has on Israel or with Israel and the Gaza Strip specifically is very problematic for his election, because this is, where did I say this was? My bad, everybody. Where the second one is? This one is DC. This is DC. So I'm going to show you some international and I'm going to show you some domestic.
And the occupation now! Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide! Stop the genocide!
That is, I mean, that is a ton of people.
Biden, you can't hide! Biden, you can't hide! We charge you with genocide! We charge you with genocide!
Wow. Just wow. So let's go back to the video because let's go back to the Morning Joe clip, because they do address some of this support that's worldwide. So let's go back and finish out this segment here.
Really ready at these achievable aims. So the message from the Americans and from the Europeans at the moment, be careful as you plan your next steps.
Quick follow up on that, Caddy. It seems that obviously Europeans have always been further away from the Israeli position that Americans have taken. That said, post ISIS attacks in Paris, and what's happened in the UK, I find it fascinating that you actually have Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, actually pushing hard to stop pro-Hamas demonstrations in London that are chanting jihad and things that we've all seen. I know you've seen when you're in London before, but it seems to me that at least that government is moving a bit more aggressively toward the Israeli position.
Yeah, and the Brits have moved naval assets into the region as well, so they're very much in lockstep. The government is very much in lockstep, but there's some disconnect between the governments and the people. You've had very big pro-Palestine.
So let me let her finish since she's going to go more detail here. I'm going to rewind it. They're saying it's a disconnect between the people and the government. How is that possible if it's representative government? How is that possible? And which way is the disconnection?
More aggressively toward the Israeli position.
Yeah, and the Brits have moved naval assets into the region as well, so they're very much in lockstep. The government is very much in lockstep, but there's some disconnect between the governments and the people. You've had very big pro-Palestinian demonstrations in France. You've had big pro-Palestinian demonstrations in London. And if you look at the domino effect of this, of any kind of big scale invasion of Gaza, and even the atrocities that, the killings that we're seeing and the suffering that we're seeing in Gaza at the moment, it gets, I've just come back from London, it gets much more play in the European press than it does in the American press even.
Oh, you mean you're admitting that the American press shut out the worldwide protest this past weekend? And all really worker protests. Anytime there's a worker protest going on, like the United States media shut out the France protest, they shut that out a lot. They shut out the NATO protests. They shut out the Palestinian protests. Google it. Go on YouTube. See if you can find how many times you can find a corporate outlet covering some of the shit that we want to listen to, which is if you type in pro-Palestinian protests, and sometimes they bring up pro-Israeli protests when you type that in. But again, let's get back to the video. They're coming close to an end in this segment.
And the Americans are trying to cover it too. But the dominoes will be the Arab world gets impatient with the Israelis, loses faith with the Israelis. The Europeans lose faith with the Israelis. And then the fear would be that the Americans do too. If this ground invasion were to go on for a long time and we were to see night after night images of Palestinians being bombed in Gaza.
Yeah, certainly those images could further sway public opinion. Administration officials in Washington, I've spoken the last couple of days, they note that Israel has built this 300,000 plus reservist force near the border. And say there's only so long you can keep a group of that size there because there are economic impacts, logistical impacts. At a certain point, the order has to be given to go. But Israel right now is listening. And U.S. officials tell me they're very careful. They're not dictating military strategy. They want to make that very clear. There's a 3-star U.S. Marine general over there now, other top officials as well, advising Israel as to what the fight may hold ahead when they do go in and how difficult it will be. And there's a sense here, senior Biden aides tell me that because the president has been so forthright with his support for Israel, going to Tel Aviv, delivering speech after speech here in the United States, backing the Israeli cause, he's bought some currency there, and that Israel may be more inclined to listen to him, that they feel like he's bought in with them, and therefore they're more willing to listen to his message of take it slow, be patient, do the right thing. But of course, the eventual decision to go and how big to go, that'll be Israel and Israel's alone, Joe, Mika.
And Mika, there would have been a time when the United States
would not have felt itself to be in a position to tell the Israelis how to fight wars in urban centers because of their experience and the problems with Gaza. But over the past 20 years, of course, in Iraq, especially Afghanistan, and when you look at what happened in our battle in Mosul, to clear out ISIS out of Mosul, that is something that we understand. General Petraeus talked about it. You're talking street by street, building by building, room by room.
Experience and lessons learned. Also, with the French president coming in, we have the American officials there. It doesn't, it's helping the slowdown because that's not going to happen with them there, the invasion.
Just that it's done right. And as Richard has said, David Ignatius has said, that
with a goal, with a purpose.
A war against Hamas is done with two objectives. One, to not destabilize the entire region and to destroy Hamas, and two, with an eye toward peace after it's over.
So we're back in 60 seconds with the very latest on the speaker mess on Capitol Hill.
So when he says destabilize the nation, the region, I'm sorry, that's what they were speaking to, what the King of Jordan was alluding to, that they're not down with this, what Saudi Arabia has alluded to as far as pausing normalization with Israel. The destabilization has begun, and they're trying to save it. That's how it looks to me. But let's continue with this segment, but move on to some other receipts here. And the next receipt is this one here, because we're talking about how Israel is costing Joe Biden. Now we go back and forth. Hey, am I locked out of here? Let me see if I'm locked out of this. Oh yeah, I reached my limit, so I have to put this on. Shoot. How did I? Biden's Palestinian policy. Let me see how I can do this, everybody. Biden's Palestinian policy. Policy. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start with my other one, FOSS. So let's start the other way around, and I can get the other part of this settled in the back. So let's start with the hostage part of this, and I'm going to come back to that. So let's insert this same segment, but let's insert this part first. And I know I'm not going to say the first name right, so let me say her last name. Lefshitz, 85, one of the two Israeli hostages released by Hamas on Monday. She said, quote, went through hell during the attack by Palestinian fighters on her kibbutz on October 7th, but that she and other hostages were treated well in captivity. So let's put this up here. Let's listen to it. Now, there is translation, thank God, in the video. There is translation in the video. So let's listen to what she says here. I'm sorry. I got another video where there's a voice over it. So this one is reading. I'll read it for you. And then there's another video that there is a voiceover that says everything, but let me play it. Released hostages, we were treated well. It says, and each of us had someone who guarded us. Oops. Pop up. I've got to get another computer. These pop-ups are ridiculous. All right, I have to go back because I got a pop-up on my screen right when I was there. Okay, so I'll just do it this way. Guarded us, and then she goes on to say they treated us well. They looked care all over the. They took care. That's an L, not a T. It's blended in with her shirt. They took care of all of the details. They are women who know what feminine hygiene means. They made sure we had everything. They were toiletries clean. They cleaned it, not us. They were very gracious. This must be said. They kept us clean, kept us fed. We had the same food they did: pita bread, cheese, melted cheese, and cucumber. That was the meal each day. So this is what one of the hostages is saying when she comes out. And in the previous video you saw with Morning Joe, how they described it when they went to the correspondent who was out in Israel. Softened this, absolutely did not mention this part of it. Now let me go back to some other receipts here on the same topic. And I'm going to start here. Here is Max Blumenthal reporting on it. And it says, Times of Israel says, the Israeli army is concerned that further hostage releases by Hamas could lead the political leadership to delay a ground incursion or even halt it midway. The Israeli army doesn't want hostages released now. Just let that sink in. And he has this receipt, if you didn't hear about that. The army is concerned that further hostage releases by Hamas could lead the political leadership to delay a ground incursion or even halt it midway. On Friday night, Hamas released an American mother and daughter, according to some reports. This contributed to a postponement of the ground offensive in light of hopes that more could be freed. Let's go to the next receipt I have here. So that's Max. Then here's a little more of what she says. This is the woman that I played the video. That woman who was captured voluntarily insisted on shaking her captor's hand upon release. It's fairly clear why Israel has a policy of killing Israeli hostages. And then it's just the receipt there. And I'm going to actually just play the video instead of reading that part. I think this might have some translation. Let's see. Hang on a second here. Oh, this doesn't have any sound. They're just showing what was reported. My bad, everybody. This doesn't have sound, so let's listen. So let's watch. So the captors are on the right, and the captives are on the left or on this right, and they're giving them food, I guess. I guess this is a video to show the treatment. I'm assuming the video is to show the treatment. Yeah. Okay. So it is in another language. There is no translation, so we can go off of that. There's no translation to that. Now let's go to the next item here. Try to keep them in order. This is the same video, but at least there's a caption. This is from Dan Cohen, and he says, Hamas said it offered to free 2 hostages for humanitarian reasons. Israel accused Hamas of what is that? Let me see. Mendacious propaganda. Hamas has released them. As one left, she shook a fighter's hand and said, peace. So let me see if this shows that. I don't think this shows that, did it? No, it's the same video. Let me see if there's a different edit at the end. Yeah, at the end here. So my bad. I didn't play it at the end earlier, but let me play it all the way to the end here. You'll see where she shakes the hand at the end here. So This is like the drop off. The UN is taking her over.
You go with this one,
and she shakes the hand. And she says peace. Shalom. So that is the video part that I wanted to show of that. Let's go to one more receipt. And I guess she was asked, why did you shake the hand of the hostage when you left? So let's play that. This is on Sky News. Now, I think there's a translation. If not, I'll read.
She was handed to the International Red Cross Committee. She took the hand of a Hamas gunman and she said,
The question is, why did you shake that Hamas activist hand when you crossed? Because they treated us very nicely. My mom is saying that they were very delicate and gentle with them and took care of all their needs.
They're not trying to hear that. International media, American media is not trying to hear that. But you heard what she said, the translation. That was her daughter that translated there. They don't want to hear this type of thing in mass media. And this is Caitlin Johnstone with this video. Says, probably not great for Israeli PR that the IDF shot and bombed the hostages while Hamas treated them nicely. Israel was reluctant to accept these hostages, desperate to prevent these encouraging scenes from taking form, and has rejected the release of 50 more captives in exchange for fuel to keep the hospital incubators online. Astonishing what you hear these people do to other people. Let's read here. And this is Ryan Grimm. I think this is an excerpt from an article, so I'm fine with using it. This cannot be understated. The IDF has said that they don't want more hostages released because they have an invasion scheduled and they don't want the hostages releasing to get in the way. And then that's just a highlighted part there. The army is concerned that further hostage releases by Hamas could lead the political leadership to delay a ground incursion. Let's go to some more here in this hostage. More of the same. That's the same quote, so I don't need to use that. Same quote that is used. Use that one. Use that one. Okay, and now I want to get to this one here. So let's play this. I thought this was a funny, not humorous in a way of sarcasm. So let's listen. This is Nico House talking about this latest sort of propaganda coming from the Israeli government, trying to counterbalance the information that's coming out about the hostages, the information that's coming out about what's happening in Gaza. So they come out with these sort of propaganda stories.
So Israeli President Isaac Herzog has made a very bold claim that Hamas is working with al-Qaeda to produce chemical weapons to use on Israel. Now, his proof for said claim is this pamphlet, perfectly laminated, clean, that was found on the body of a dead Hamas soldier that has al-Qaeda written in bold English letters. I mean, there are so many places to start with all the problems with this.
So what Nico House has pointed out here is that, like, it doesn't feel like they're even putting effort into this propaganda. Like, there's not even no effort into this shit. And he proves it in this video. I'm gonna rewind it just a little bit because it's pretty funny, this part, how he's pointing out how it's written in English in big bold letters. But let's listen.
Qaeda, written in bold English letters. I mean, there are so many places to start with all the problems with this claim, but I guess we can start at the fact that how dumb do you think we are to believe that Hamas is keeping laminated pamphlets that came from their HP DeskJet printer that tells Israel exactly what they're planning on doing? Or the fact that Herzog is claiming that Hamas is working with Al-Qaeda to make these weapons, except for the fact that Hamas literally doesn't get along with Al-Qaeda, per Israel's own sources. Israel says that Hamas doesn't get along with Al-Qaeda. Or there's the fact that this top secret pamphlet is actually a book cover that President Herzog got off the internet. Y'all, I'm not playing. There's a QR code. You can scan.
This is a book cover. It's called, it says, unspecified author. I can't tell. Ramsey, I guess that's the name. I don't know. I was looking for the title of the book, but I don't see it.
Scan it if you want to go buy the book. In other words, they believe the world is so easily propagandized and so stupid that they can print out a book cover and pretend that it is top secret documentation. It is proof that Hamas or Palestine plans on working with Al-Qaeda to create chemical weapons. Holy shit. I don't know if that says more about the Israeli government or the goddamn rest of the world. I don't even know, honestly. But what we do know is that in arms groups around the world, reports have circulated that Israel has its own set of biological and chemical weapons to complement its nuclear arsenal. What we do know is while they're pointing the finger at Hamas in Palestine, that Israel itself has not signed the 1972 Biological and Toxins Weapon Convention Treaty. Interesting. And what we do know is that Israel has zero problem committing war crimes using weapons that they're not supposed to use, because not only recently, but since at least 2009, they've been using white phosphorus on Gaza, which violates international laws. Same plot, different movie. I mean, bro, it's literally like imperialist bingo. Okay, you said terrorist organization. All right. Human shields. All right. Chemical weapons. Okay. Islam. Okay. And you said Iran, Lebanon, or Syria involved. Oh, bet. Bingo. My point is that they use the same tactics over and over and over again, bro. They lie to justify genocide. They lie to justify killing hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, hundreds of thousands of Afghans, and the way they get you to cheerlead and even consent to sending U.S. troops to aid in this genocide is by claiming they're fighting some existential war on terror and claiming that the other side is doing such horrible things that, you know, a few thousand civilians dying, it's worth it as long as we get those bad guys. But in reality, it's the United States, it's Israel, it's all of their little allies that are simply projecting and are guilty of the very atrocities they accuse their enemies of being guilty of.
Spot on. That's one of the longer hotspots. I don't mind the longer hotspots.
A very bold claim.
I know some other people like shorter videos, but I don't mind the longer ones. So that was a great video by Nico House. Now, we keep hearing about the hostages and how Palestine has over 200 hostages. So let's read this from Party for Socialism and Liberation. Let's read this tweet here. While the U.S. corporate media is laser focused on the 200 who are held by Hamas, Israel is currently holding 10,000 Palestinians, including children, captive in Israeli jails. Many are held indefinitely without charges. Free all Palestinian political prisoners. And there is the Al Jazeera headline. Israel doubles number of Palestinian prisoners to 10,000 in 2 weeks. And here's the sub-headline. since October 7, Israel has arrested 4,000 laborers from Gaza and more than 1,000 people in the occupied West Bank, Palestinian officials say. It's a lose-lose situation for Joe Biden in the stance that he has. Now, speaking to the part I wanted to speak to here, and we're going to get into some article information in a second here. Let's watch this video just to cover. This is where I think why we're seeing sort of a shift, where we're seeing at least a shift to where they have to at least acknowledge there is an other side, and it's not just a small group of people. So I'm going to take you around the world with this video to show you. I'm glad I saved this. I saved it in a different place why I couldn't find it earlier. Instead of going to Chicago and instead of showing you individual videos, this video has different protests across the world that has gone on. And if you watch it closely, they'll go through the different cities. They'll label them. So let's watch.
فلسطين عربية Palestine. ¿Dónde están? No se ven las sanciones a Israel.
Great video there, just showing all the different protests. Now, this leads to, or this is part of the same segment. Like I said, this is an overarching where this is basically different small little segments, I guess you can say, talking about how the position that the United States and Joe Biden administration has taken is not a good position on Israel. It's not sustainable. We talked about how it's not sustainable in the election, talked about domestically how it's creating war in the Middle East. And I feel like the protest is showing how this can go haywire, because these people who are protesting in the United States, at least, could be and most likely are voters. So how this is not going to work out well for the United States. Hang on a second here. Let me bring up this next piece. Let's go to this one here. I'm going to bring up this headline here. So I'll put this headline on the screen. Maybe I won't click on it so it won't be so big and you can see it better. So let's now go to this topic here. And I have another browser open. Well, first, let me see if I could do it. Let me see. I have it open, the article. So I am, there's a paywall where I can't watch it. I can't show it on this browser. The browser that happens to work with StreamYard, which is what, Chrome. But the browser where I'm not behind a paywall, StreamYard does not work with. So what I'm going to do is try to share my other screen. This is Windows. This is Chrome. If I put this up front. Let me see one thing here. Second. See if this works. In just 1 second, everybody, give me a moment. I've never tried this, but it is important to put this on the screen if I can. And give me 1 second to try to do this here. Nothing so far. All right, yeah, it doesn't look like I'm gonna be able to do it. All right, so let's do it the makeshift way that I can do it then, and that is putting the article up here, and then I'm just gonna read it on the different page. So this is what I'm gonna be covering just for a minute, because I do want to read a little bit of this article. It does cover some good points, and it speaks to the broader topic that we're talking about, but I am going to read this article right here, and that is Biden's Israel-Palestine policy could cost him the election. And let's zoom in on that pod and this article. All right, here we go. The president's blank check support of Israel's war on Gaza is alienating many of the black and brown voters voters he needs to win re-election. And this is by Eli Mistel. I think that's how you say his name, Eli Mistel. So let's continue. Pull this up for myself. It says, I am neither Israeli nor Palestinian, nor am I an expert on the Middle East geopolitical, terrorism, security, or colonization. I am an expert in American constitutional law, which in this situation is as useful as being an expert in sandcastle construction during a tsunami. As such, I have little to add to the current international configuration and the foreign policy discourse around it. Instead, I have tried to read, listen, and learn, and generally not say anything that could be used by most morally bankrupt people to justify the murder of children, both Israeli and Palestinian. However, this is where he mixes a little Trump derangement, because with his telling of the story of how this position that the Biden administration takes could be problematic. And he goes on with the article that says this. However, I am an American, a black one, who has a lot of experience in listening to actual people of color, even as their voices are drowned out by or dismissed by the prevailing white media. As such, I believe it is in my remit to warn white readers that Joe Biden's unwaveringly pro-Israeli stance has the potential to do significant harm to his prospects for re-election amongst voters he needs, young, black, and brown people. This is the nation. Sometimes they do put out good work. They used to be a lot better back in the day, but most recently, since the election of Joe Biden, they've been pretty terrible in shielding for him. But once in a now and then, they sneak in this. Now, this is semi-good because, again, this guy believes in Trump derangement, and he's going to say it in this next paragraph here. I know many people who will not want to think about American political realities so soon after a terrorist attack, while Israel continues to pummel Gaza with air strikes, and Hamas continues to hold Israeli hostages. But as a person, this is the Trump derangement coming in here, But as a person who desperately wants to stop the anti-democratic tide of MAGA-style fascism in our own country, I cannot help but be concerned. Biden risks labeling himself as a president who is in favor of colonization and one who will turn a blind eye to ethnic cleansing and war crimes. And those are tough labels to shake once they take hold in a community of color. This is sort of surprising that this is in a corporate newspaper that they're saying, because it's not that he just simplified by saying, oh, you know, you're for this, you're not on the side of Palestinians, and that's just not good. He's saying you're being on the side of colonization, which is not good. And this guy is a constitutional scholar or something like that, and he's infamous for saying that the Constitution is sort of trash. When he made that statement on The View, conservative media went crazy. It was all over Fox News, I remember when it came out. But let's continue. And I'm going to reread this last sentence. Biden's risks labeling himself as a president who is in favor of colonization and one who will turn a blind eye to ethnic cleansing and war crimes. And those are tough labels to shake once they take hold in communities of color. Voters of color are strategic and willing to swallow a lot of nonsense and vote for the lesser of two evils. But there are some who will simply not pull the lever for any president in any party who stands aside while an oppressed people is besieged, starved, and bombed into oblivion. That is spot on. Even if you don't think Israel is a colonial power, or you don't think the Israeli government is violating human rights of Palestinians as they wage war against Hamas, the Americans who do think those things are voters Biden is losing right now. Those are the kinds of voters who once lost, Biden will never win back. And for all of the flaws of this Biden derangement syndrome, Trump derangement syndrome person, he is right on a small amount of things. Like, he is pretty shit libbery 7 out of 10 things, but then there's 3 things that no one in the Democratic Party, in the Democratic establishment, will bring up that this guy does bring up. Saying that the Constitution is sort of trash, that's one of those things. Saying that Biden should not be talking about he wants to fund the police, that was another thing he said on The View, because that's not going to turn off that's going to turn off so many black voters. He actually said that. I remember that exchange with Joy Behar on The View. He says some things that are right. This is another one of those things that he's saying that is spot on. And you can see it in the people that are out there on the protests. It's a very mixed crowd of protesters that are young. They're 18 to 25. And I would say maybe the protest is 18 to 40 for the majority. Of course, I'm not saying everybody, because if there's a wide variety from kids to elderly that's out there protesting. Separate and apart from Israel's legitimate efforts to secure the release of its citizens taken as hostage and secure itself from terrorist threats, there are those in and around the Israeli government who have used plainly genocidal language to describe the conflict, calling Palestinians human animals. And I played one of those videos, denying that Palestinian civilians have any rights because Hamas is there. Elected leadership, elected in 2006, by the way, and Hamas has not allowed those civilians to hold an election since, or saying that the war is between the children of the light and the children of the dark. He's referring to a tweet put out by an Israeli government official that later deleted. We covered it in a segment. Biden did not condemn this language, nor has he issued public warnings to Israel that the United States would not stand for human rights violations, nor has he stood shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with any Palestinian American, calling for a basic respect for human rights. This article is so spot on. I wish you guys could see the words, but for whatever reason today, my vision is a little bit better, so the reading of it is a lot smoother. But I think I'll stop there. You can go read the full article on The Nation. Just Google it. The title again. I'm locked out on the Chrome browser, so I'm a paywall. I guess I've read too many articles on The Nation for the month, so they blocked me out on the paywall on Chrome. And where I can view it, where I'm reading from, is on Safari, but Safari does not work properly for StreamYard. So let's get to another article before we close out here. Another part of this article, another part of this, and that is the DSA. It's this article here that Nick put out, and I'll read the headline. Why I Just Quit DSA. After over 4 decades as a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, one of the group's founding members is leaving in sorrow and anger. And I'm gonna bring this up, but I'm gonna read Nick's caption first. One of the founding members of DSA quit because the DSA opposed the genocide of Palestinian people. How was this person in leadership within DSA for 4 decades? And that is a great point that Nick brings up. But let me go ahead and bring up the article. Actually, since I'm here, let's go from here. Let's go to Google from here. And then say why I quit the DSA. Oh, you know what? I think that's on The Nation too. I think that's on The Nation too. So if it is, why quit the DSA? If it is, may have to read it the other way. Yeah, it's also. But I can read this part at least. So Google puts up a little snippet right here from that article. I left to protest the DSA leadership's politically and morally bankrupt response to the horrific Hamas October 7th anti-Jewish program. I guess a program that took the lives of that took the lives of 1,400 people, mostly civilians, and saw over 200 hostages carried off to Gaza. Both groups of victims, including children and infants. So I guess the person left because of the leadership or because of the response and how they call it being politically and morally bankrupt response to the bombing or the attack as it's described on October 7th. I am going to bring it up and just read a little bit of it. Am I locked out now over here too? Let me see. Oh, no. I can close this. All right. Let me go to this other article here. Then I'll bring it up to everybody else. How does this work? Let's go to The Nation. So yeah, it looks like I'll have to just have this here, and then I'll read a little bit of it in the background. Here is where is it? Oh, what? Still, why I left? Okay, here it goes. All right, so I finally found it. I will read a little bit of it in the background. I'll put up the headline here in the sub-headline for you to read on the screen, but I'll read just a little bit of it, not too much of it, because I'm going to be getting out of here pretty soon. But it is important to cover this. because we have criticism for the DSA, but apparently the DSA is too radical for people, for even some people. And the question I have is the same question that Nick has right here. How was the person like this able to get in leadership in the DSA? So I'll have that up right there. I have Nick's tweet up, and then I'll read part of the article in the background. Why I just quit the DSA. After over 4 decades as a member of the Democratic DSA, one of the group's founding members is leaving in sorrow and anger. I belong to only 2 nationally organized left-wing groups in my life. The first, the Students for Democratic Society, for just over a year. The second, the DSA, for 41 years. My membership in SDS ended in 1969 when I was 18 years old, without any input or agency on my part. When the organization collapsed around me in a chaotic maelstrom of rival manifestos, mass walkouts, fervent chanting, and a few fistfights, all of which scattered the group, thousands of members in the wind. Actually, I think that's a predecessor to the DSA, the Democratic Society. So it's a predecessor to the DSA. My membership in the DSA ended with considerably less drama last week when at a somewhat more advanced age, I resigned from the organization via an email. I left to protest the DSA's leadership politically and morally bankrupt response to the horrific Hamas October 7th anti-Jewish pogrom that took the lives of 1,400 people, mostly civilians, and saw over 200 hostages carried off into Gaza. Both groups of victims, including children and infants. Infants are children. That's like saying the same thing. But whether DSA will now follow SDS into a political oblivion is for the future to tell. But one thing a lifetime of studying the history of American radicalism suggests to me is that these pop-ups. Pop up and back to the article. Whether the DSA will now follow SDS, and that's the previous organization, into political oblivion is for the future to tell. But one thing a lifelong of studying the history of American radicalism suggests to me is that, as a rule, there are rarely second acts in the lives of organizations captured by left sectarians. This is clearly a liberal who is mad and is left the DSA. What I do mean by intrinsics in left-wing parlance, the term refers to tightly organized groups who, without sharing the beliefs of larger and more loosely organized bodies, join and proceed to either wreck or, where possible, capture them for ends at odds with the spirit and purpose of the organizational. So he's using a lot of mumbo jumbo to say this position that the DSA has taken on this Israel matter is so outside of the bounds of normal discourse. You're gonna the position is so out of bounds, it's going to lead you to obscurity, and that's why he's leaving. When in my view, this is a Zionist who is leaving the DSA over this issue, and didn't leave the DSA over strike breaking, didn't lead the DSA over supporting apartheid Israel, but is leaving the DSA because they support or have a mildly pro-Palestinian stance. Because I call it mild because you still support the power that is oppressing them through financial support and through the support of the Democratic Party by way of DSA members like AOC and DSA adjacents like Bernie Sanders. So all of this is costing Joe Biden, as I mentioned earlier, and I think that's most of the stories I had today. So my time with the stream is coming to an end. I covered the hostage. I didn't get to the Ron, so I'm glad I didn't include him. I covered that. Okay, so I covered the ones I wanted to cover. Did I cover this one? Yes, I did. All right. So I believe I covered everything that I wanted to cover. I do want to play this nonsense from Politics Girl. Haven't seen her in a while, but this is her video saying, I guess it's getting around. This is the establishment putting out a authentic video from a real worker. This is such a set that she has that's supposedly her real house. This is such a set that she has to appear like she's a regular worker, but she's working for the establishment. Let's listen to what she says. This is her video saying it's ridiculous to call Republicans and Democrats the same. This is what we've been pushing, and it's gotten to the powers that be, as so much so that they've decided to put out this propaganda to say, what do you mean? The Democrats are way better. Let's listen.
Hi, I'm hoping we can finally put to rest this ridiculous idea that both parties are the same. I could go back and forth on the policies and position differences between Republicans and Democrats. I could contrast the criminal records of both anticipated presidential candidates. I could do a side-by-side comparison of how the two parties feel about women, gay people, trans people, the free press, democracy. Hey, I could compare the economy and how it fares under Democrats and Republicans, but spoiler alert, it does way better under Democrats. I could talk about which party is banning books, which party passes laws to make democracy harder, and which passes them to make it easier. I could talk about which party keeps shutting down the government. But ultimately, my goal would be to illustrate that
you notice she's saying, I could talk about these things, but I can't, as she's talking about the things she says she can't talk about. And she continues in this manner. Let's continue.
Two parties are not the same. And I don't think anything proves that point better than the week of September 18th, 2023. That one random week in American government told us more about the two.
So forget about the donors. Forget about that. How they have the same donors. Forget about how they have the same war policy. Forget about how they have the same policy against workers, how they have the same policy towards capitalism, how they have the same policy of having no healthcare system. Forget about all of that. She's going to say, this one day out of this 1 week illustrates why there's such a huge difference. None of the long-standing legislation or policy beliefs, none of that matters. You know, the larger indicators, this matters. So let's play this. Or let's finish this, I should say.
Parties than any useless poll could ever do. So I'm just going to walk us through what happened. And by the end, I hope you'll see, as those of us who follow this stuff closely do, that there's no question as to which party really deserves your support. So the week in question, the Biden administration took the first steps to remove medical bills from people's credit scores, to improve the credit rating of millions of Americans who had the bad luck of getting sick. Now, this decision comes from the same party who brought us the Affordable Care.
I mean, when you're talking crumbs, this person is getting crumbs of crumbs of crumbs and presenting them as some sort of large chasm between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And this first example is just terrible. To improve the credit scores, you wiped away debt, or you did something to improve in credit scores? Did you give them better health care? You did something to improve credit scores. Okay, let's see what else she lists.
Care Act made it illegal to deny people insurance for pre-existing conditions, and just passed legislation to lower prescription.
Made it illegal for deny people for pre-existing conditions. You just make the insurance to where no one can afford it. And you make the co-pays prohibitive so you can't even use it. But this is a plus that she wants us to give her.
Prescription drug prices.
Then she mentions the prescription drug prices. Let's let her play this. Oops.
Affordable Care Act made it illegal to deny people insurance for pre-existing conditions and just passed legislation to lower prescription drug prices.
Lower prescription drug is like a handful of drugs, and it doesn't even start, I think, until 2025. But we're supposed to give you credit in 2023 for something that hasn't even launched.
In contrast, the Republicans voted against lowering prescription drug prices, are proposing cutting Medicare and Medicaid, and tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act 70 times. The
Affordable Care Act is a freaking disaster. And this is what they like to lean on. The Affordable Care Act gave millions of people, or maybe it's thousands of people, millions of people, let's give them more credit, give millions of people Medicaid. People that are dirt poor and can't afford health care. Isn't that great, CJ? Is it? Oh, you mean the thing, in order to qualify, you have to be in a perpetual state of poverty. You mean that thing?
Republicans are funded heavily by Big Pharma, so they clearly don't care how much money it costs to be sick, but they definitely...
She got the audacity. Let's listen to this.
The Republicans are funded heavily by Big Pharma, so they...
The Republicans are funded heavily by Big Pharma. Is that even serious? Joe Biden, Jim Clyburn. I think Jim Clyburn is one of the top people of all pharmaceutical money in all of Congress.
Clearly don't care how much money it costs to be sick, but they definitely don't care if your credit gets dinged when you can't pay for it.
Credit.
The same week, President Biden announced the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, because as he said, thoughts and prayers are not enough. The Republican position for years has been that guns are...
And this legislation is not enough. I'm going to go. Don't worry. Hold on, everybody. I mean... All right, so coordinating who's picking up the baby. So I will have to go pick up the baby in less than 10 minutes. So let's get through this one again. Let me rewind just to remind myself what she was just saying.
Thoughts and prayers are not enough. The Republican...
They're leaning on this very do nothing legislation, gun legislation. Like it literally does very minimal crumbs.
Position for years has been that guns are our God-given right. There's nothing we can do about the deaths. And they supported laws that said we couldn't even research gun violence, let alone try and do anything about it. The week of September 18th, Biden made a plan to go...
And just to be clear, guns aren't the problem. Getting rid of guns isn't the fix for the problem of guns. Fixing economics is the solution to crime. If you're a person who says, I'm serious about alleviating crime in an area, my first question would be, what is the economic plan that you have to fix the crime in the area? If your plan is militarily, and I'm talking about the police state, then you're not serious about fixing crime, and that includes gun control. You're not serious about fixing crime. You're serious about putting a lid on the boiling water, not actually making the water not boil.
Go to Michigan to join the picket line with United Auto Workers of America, because in his words, the union workers are fighting for their fair share of the value they helped create. While Republican presidential candidates, despite Donald Trump's photo shoot with union workers, all subscribe to union buster positions, with Tim Scott saying the quiet part out loud, if you strike, you should be fired. Simple as...
Yeah, I'm not going to get through this whole video. I didn't, and I watched the first minute. I didn't realize it was going to be so many things I had to debunk here. This is a 5-minute video too. There's so many things I have to debunk. So I'm going to have to dedicate an actual where she's on the thumbnail because this is a lot.
Workers all subscribe to union buster positions.
So yeah, this union part, this is, you got the
their
audacity.
fair share of the value they helped create. While Republican presidential candidates
Go back to
joined the picket line with United anything about it. The week of September 18th, Biden made a plan to go to Michigan to join the picket line with United Auto Workers of America because, in his words, the union workers are fighting for their fair share of the value they helped create. While Republican presidential candidates, despite Donald Trump's photo shoot with union workers, all subscribe to union buster positions. With
Union buster positions. Joe Biden busted a union late last year. How are you even, like, how are you able to say these things knowing this stuff about this guy? And shame on the UAW president, Sean Fain. I will call him a sellout at this point. Shame on him for giving Biden the ability to even have anybody argue that he's pro-labor after he broke a strike. Now people like this can propagandize people by using that. So I'm going to have to come back to this. I just don't have time to do this one today. I'll go ahead and put out some, oh, Zoya's in the chat. I'll put out some of her comments here. California has some of the strictest gun laws. Strictest gun laws and some of the highest gun crime. Why? No one is enforcing the laws that exist unless they're going after a marginalized group. Gun laws price us out. Let's go to a number. What about East Palestine? Exactly. Joe Biden, a union buster. Like, nobody believes this stuff, and I'm so happy. At least nobody in our community is buying this nonsense coming from people like her. So I am going to be getting off. Maybe I'll let it play. I don't know. I don't want to do that to you guys. I'll play something better to send us out, but not even all white people, because some poor white people, they don't even get that advantage of it. The Second Amendment is not real. You don't really have you don't really have a right for Second Amendment. And Nick always says it the right way. If a police has justification for shooting you by you simply having a gun in your hand or in your possession, how do you have Second Amendment rights? That's real easy to examine. So anybody who says that, if I could be shot, not like you show up and, oh, I'm in the middle of a gunfight and he shows up and there's a gunfight and he's shot. Not that. All right, so let me get out of here. I guess I'll play this video as a way of exiting, and then I'm gonna be. Oh yeah, I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. I gotta go pick up my daughter. Yeah, I'm done. So I gotta like leave like right this second to go get her. Did you want to close out or something?
Yeah,
I
sure.
was gonna play this video. Yeah, okay. So I'll pass it to you. You can do what you like, sir. I gotta take off and get my daughter, who gets out in about 10 minutes. But luckily, I don't live far from her school. So, but I'm gonna get going, JB. I pass it on to you, sir. I'll take this down so you can do what you like, and I'll take this caption off too. I'll put the RBN live up, sir. There's a lot going on. I will talk to you through DM. I'm finally able to go through our DMs now. I see all of you guys have been having some great conversation about a lot of stuff. JB, I pass to you, sir, and I'm out.
All right. Take care, CJ, and I will close out the show for you. I made it in time. So, hey, guys, everybody, those of you who are on RBN, I just got finished doing my show. I was doing a Q&A just a little while ago. So that was actually a really good stream. A lot of great questions regarding my thoughts on different things. So if you guys would like to, you guys can go to my channel and go and check that out. As far as what's going on lately with me before, you guys head out, one of the things that I would like to give us some attention to is the fact that we're raising money for for mutual aid as well. So if you guys have not seen, we're going to be doing that for Orlando RBN. And so if you guys would like to, you guys can also contribute to that. And so if you guys can if you guys would like to, you guys can do that through Cash App. We go $ Orlando RBN. If you guys would like to donate for that, where our goal is to raise $3,000. So just to let you guys know, that's what we're doing. Let me put this in the chat just so that you guys can also see this as well. Wow, there's 420 people watching. 420. Yeah. All right. So there you go. So you guys have that there. And let me share. Let me see. I can probably just change. Probably just change it. Now you're at the JB show. Yeah. All right. So boom. You guys can go to Orlando, $ Orlando RBN. This is going to be goal for $3,000 for grocery gift cards, toiletries, and warm clothes. So that's what we're raising money for as well. So if you guys would like to, you guys can also donate to that as well so that we can get this out to our neighbors here in Orlando. Just wanted to make sure I came in and got that in as well. So thank you so very much to everybody who have donated so far as well. Just coming into, just want to give a thanks. I'm not sure if he covered this, but thanks to Darren. Keep up the fantastic work, CJ. Wish we had a UK RBN. Thank you so very much. Darren was a member for 8 months. We have memberships for 8 months now. Whoa, thank you. Thank you so very much. Also, from Darren, also gave us 10 pounds. Says the Western media coverage is very similar to 9/11 Iraq war coverage. Sad thing is Europe, we no longer have independent leaders like Chirac and Schroeder, all following the U.S. talking points now. So I just want to make sure I get to that. Also, we'll be going into the Rock as well to get some of the comments off of Rockman, just in case. All right, so let me go into there, and then we can head out. All right. So Iona says, hostage message, my captors are awesome. I like this vacation. So I'm guessing CJ played, because I was live at the same time. I'm guessing he played what happened when the hostages were released and they were actually treated really well. Yeah. So, yeah, Jutech says IDF are total. Oh, I gotta be careful what I say. U.S. Too, but the U.S. is real military prowess. Gotcha. All right. So, wow. Let me see. Drew Tech says, I don't know about the whole treating hostages well. They could have very well threatened her. But like I said, I don't know. Does play dirty sometimes, though, compared to Israel, they're saints. Interesting. So I just wanted to cover some of those as well. All right, people. So thank you so very much to everybody for sticking with us while I give some attention to the mutual aid fundraiser. So thank you so very much. And to anybody that has donated so far, thank you so very much. The goal is, of course, $3,000 so that we can feed and give warm clothes and toiletries to all the people in Orlando. So thank you very much for that. Anywho's, so now I'm going to close it out for CJ. And thank you so very much to everybody. Stay tuned for, I think Nick tomorrow has Nick at Night. So be sure to take in and stay tuned for that. Deuces, Bruces.